Good morning. Welcome to BusinessWorks. I'm Jackie Atchison, Executive Director at the Arts Council for Monterey County. BusinessWorks is one of our programs that provides solutions for the busy creatives through quarterly professional development workshops. Today, time permitting, we hope to answer the questions throughout the program as well as at the end. For those of you who are registered attendees, please put any of your questions in the chat box. And those who are attending on Facebook, if you could post your questions in the comments section. We'll try to get to as many as possible. Recently, the Arts Council Board of Directors approved a new strategic plan with the overarching strategy to advance social equity through the arts. And we do this by supporting artists, programs, and organizations that are emerging, under-resourced, and underrepresented. Today's discussion will focus on what other arts organizations are also doing to advance social equity in their communities. So I'd like to welcome our four esteemed guests this morning and have them each introduce themselves and speak to us why they're here today. And if you'd like to know more about them, we have a link to their very impressive bios, which will be posted in the comments and also on our website. So I'd like to start this morning with Ayanna Bowery, the Deputy Director of the California Arts Council.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. Yes, my name is Ayanna Bowery, and I'm very grateful to be able to serve as the Deputy Director for the California Arts Council. And I said yes to this opportunity because I love to be in dialogue with community and understand different strategies that are being used that always will help me in my role as I try to support the agency approach statewide strategies to address racial equity. So I'm here to listen. I'm always going to learn from all of you and share some of what I have learned over the years of working in arts, but also working in public health efforts that really were focused on supporting those most disproportionately affected with the least positive outcomes from social determinants. So I take that, I bring that with me into this discussion as well, and have done so for the last 5 years at the California Arts Council. Very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And next, I'd like to introduce Catherine Canton, the Racial and Equity Manager for the California Arts Council.
Hi, I'm Catherine Canton. I use they, them pronouns, and I want to also bring in the name of the land that I am participating and joining you all from. Huichin is the original name of this land, and it is stewarded by the Lishan Ohlone people. I also want to acknowledge all Indigenous people who are stewarding the lands and who have been stewards and who will continue to be stewards, and really make the expectation for myself that I will continue to listen and learn from their stewardship and take Indigenous folks from the lands that I am on currently, their leadership in terms of how to be in better relationship with this land and with the Indigenous people. I also want to acknowledge the people of the African diaspora whose creative, physical, intellectual labor has built this place that I get to call home and that we get to call home. Yeah, so just wanted to introduce that. I am the Race and Equity Manager with the California Arts Council, and my role is really to steward our internal racial equity practices and journey, and to support our staff and council in those practices so that there's a ripple effect and policy and institutional change on at our agency level.
Okay, thank you. Our next guest is Shayna Bowie, the manager of Destiny Arts Center.
Hi, I'm Shayna Bowie. I have been working at Destiny for about 2 years as the on-site program manager. More than that, though, I've been working in arts education and youth development in Oakland and San Francisco since about 2006. So, deeply invested in this work. And I was very excited to come to this conversation because more than just talking to folks about what racial equity looks like, what social equity looks like, I'm really interested in what folks are doing. So that part of this conversation is what really drew me to it. What are steps that people are taking? I feel like this year has led to a lot of thought. And I'm interested now to see what the action is behind that thought. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Indy Mccasey, Executive Director of the Arts Education Alliance of the Bay Area.
Hey, hi everybody. Indy Mccasey, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm from the Bay Area. I grew up in the South Bay. Again, really appreciated Catherine just bringing attention to the fact that that is unceded Ohlone territory. I'm actually currently zooming in from the land of the Haudenosaunee Alliance. And the reason why I'm here is about relationship building. I feel like racial equity work is primarily about the relationships we hold, both with each other, with the land. And I'm here because Karen Lee Garcia from the Arts Council for Monterey County invited me, and so I really appreciate the connections that we're creating across the Bay Area and kind of beyond, and really focusing this work around issues of equity, specifically racial justice, and whose art and cultural practices gets to be funded and gets to be seen and recognized. So I'm super excited for this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all again for being here. We really appreciate it. So we're going to break from our traditional BusinessWorks format today, and instead of having individual presentations, we're going to have the presenters speak on predetermined topics and then answer questions from our workshop attendees and each other, more of a discussion format. So the first one we're going to ask is, what is your organization role in the arts in your community? And why is it the responsibility of arts organizations to advance social equity? Johnny, do you want to start that one?
Yeah. So Destiny as an organization has been around over 30 years. And it was started as an organization, although very much so about martial arts and dance. It was started as a community organization, having kids understand self-defense, having them do something productive and leading their community. So that's kind of the ground that Destiny stands on. And I think in recent years, and Indy knows this because Indy was at Destiny when this was happening, we developed the theory of change around igniting social justice through the arts. So I don't look at Destiny as an arts organization, I look at it as a social justice organization. That being said, I think what's really important in this time is for organizations like Destiny that have a lineage, that have a history, have been around for decades, to really work together with other organizations to advance the arts community and where it's going. So that's why I really enjoy the work. So I'm also on the executive committee at AYABA. I do work with the Oakland Unified Art Partners. I think where we are moving towards is coming together, large, small arts organizations, ones that work in schools, that work in the community, to really think about how we can advocate together, how we can push funders in the directions that they need to be going, how we can push cities and governments to be investing where they say they want the change to happen. Because often everybody's talking about like, yeah, we care about these communities, and we're like, okay, so where are the dollars? Because that's the next step. And coming together to push those things together is how the change happens. I think we're moving away from that, every organization fighting for every dollar that they can get separately, and we have to work collectively to make that change.
Great, thank you. How about you, Ayana? What do you think?
Well, I love this question because it always reminds me what I'm here to do. So thank you for that. I think it's really the responsibility of government. I think government has a unique responsibility to get into the game of racial equity and achieving racial equity, because the government has been an instrument of racism forever. The system of government was established on some systems that perpetuated slavery. So I think that as a government employee that I am and have been for a while, my goal is always to understand the system with which I'm working in, and then push against it and transform it. So we're, as an agency, we're looking with this established framework, strategic framework that we have. We now can look at various aspects of the way that we support arts in the state of California, and break down those systems that have been established, question those systems, look at new ways of engaging, understanding what our role is to either perpetuate a pipeline that doesn't bring in BIPOC artists into arts administration, or a pipeline that does. Looking at, we also have programs that are in the institution, and that's a real interesting reality for our agency, because we understand the history of the institution and how it's devastated Black and Brown communities. So within that system, however, we have a more amazing program where we provide art provided by artists from the community in the institution. So in every way that we possibly can as a state agency, we need to realize that we work within a white supremacy culture and work on taking steps to dismantle that within our purview, within our locus of control. So some things that I think are really important to the agency, and the council has definitely pushed through and made these amazing policies, is that we now have we require folks to submit a racial equity statement if they're going to apply for a grant program. We've started a new program for administrators of color, trying to bring those community artists that want to do administration. If you look at the agencies across the state, you know, they're predominantly run by white women, essentially, at a certain age demographic. So part of what we're trying to do now, and this is not the newest thing, I stand on the shoulders of many people who have worked at the state to plant the seeds for what we're seeing now, and bring and start things that we're now bringing back. So I want to first acknowledge that. But you know, looking at individual artist fellowships, making sure that we have policies that give advantage to small arts organizations, trying our best to understand who we fund. Are they of the people that they're serving? Are the boards of the people that they're serving? Is there a consciousness around that? So looking at those types of ways to make change that hopefully are definitely systemic and sustainable. That's part of the role of government. And we've done a lot of work at the state to understand that role and the significance of that role in the history, and how we can change it going forward through our work with the Government Alliance on Race Equity. The California Arts Council joined that cohort several years ago, and since then, many strategies have been implemented to make sure that race equity is central to the work that we do.
Great, thank you so much. Catherine, do you want to follow up on that?
No, I think Ayana said it really beautifully. So what Ayana said.
Ditto. Okay. How about you, Andy?
I'm also in the Ditto fan club right now. I really appreciated, Ayana, the way that you broke down the responsibility of the government. I think around, you know, government is public funding. And so what has been, you know, where have public dollars been going? And I think it's really important to name where historically public dollars have gone. Also, you know, private philanthropic funding. We know historically they've gone to predominantly white institutions to uphold the art forms from those institutions as a pinnacle of what it means, you know, socially to have quality artistic merit. And I think what's really exciting now is there's a lot of challenges to that and awareness raising and a lot of ability for the multitude of art forms that are expressed in communities that, you know, are paying into public funding, or even if you have been a funder of kind of the historical institutions, it's a great opportunity to kind of notice and name what hasn't been funded, why it's important. And I love the focus on artists. Shayna and I both love the focus on young artists and teaching artists. And so, and I personally, because of somebody who is really involved with schools and the lack of cultural content for young people to access in schools, they're denied their cultural history and an ability to create in the lineage of that history. And so I'm super excited about the ways that our schools can embrace the arts and cultural practices, and more young people will see educators and artists and get to collaborate with them who look like them and share a similar cultural context. So that's a big reason why I do this work, and a lot of the Arts Education Alliance of the Bay Area work is around helping to form those local coalitions between schools and community arts organizations like Destiny Arts Center, and to try to bring together young artists, teachers, educators, anybody in the community who is aligned around those values.
Great, thank you. So Ayana kind of already touched base on this, but we're going to ask, what changes have your organization made, or how you've supported other organizations to remove barriers and advance equity? Ayana, is there anything else you want to talk about on that?
Hey, don't give me the mic. You give me the mic, I'm looking.
Okay, you got it.
Let me go next. I'll let somebody else go first.
Okay, how about you, Indy?
Sure. One thing that's really huge, Shayna mentioned she is on the board of the Arts Education Alliance of the Bay Area. When I came on board, we had already started as an organization to really look closely at the membership of our board, like to look closely at our board makeup. And I think that's a huge critical question that's being asked of all nonprofit and especially arts and cultural organizations around the country. And 5 years ago, our board was predominantly white, predominantly worked at large cultural institutions, and were predominantly from San Francisco. As an organization, we came out of San Francisco predominantly, but if we are continuing to work as bringing together groups from across the Bay Area, we knew that we needed to shift who our leadership was made up of. So over the last 4 years, our board demographics have shifted. We have board members coming from the East Bay, from smaller community arts organizations, and over half of our board is BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, or people of color artists and arts administrators. So we're still working on that demographic. We'd love to see more teaching artists, and we'd love to see more young people. And we'd love to see more geographic representation from throughout the Bay Area, so that we're really representing, the kind of immense genius and magic of the Bay Area. And another piece of note is that any event that we produce or put on through AABA, we've made a commitment to have it be led or co-led by BIPOC arts leader. So ensuring that that person is paid and that that our organization is always having that representation. And again, we're still working on ensuring that there's also young people represented in those events and paid for their time and expertise.
Great, thank you. How about you, Catherine? You want to follow up on what the California Arts Council is doing?
Yeah, to build off of Ayana's continuing legacy and the work of our staff, I think I'll reiterate participating in GARE, the Government Alliance for Racial Equity. Even if you're not a government agency, you can still use their resources. They have amazing slide decks and videos and things like an action plan toolkit. So I'll have to say we've been doing a lot of internal work, right? But my role specifically and our locus of control, as Ayana was saying, is our institutional policies and our culture. So we've been doing a lot of work around articulating what is our culture, our organizational culture. So making the implicit explicit. And that has been helping us to really say like, okay, what is a feasible shift in our organizational culture that is perpetuating white supremacy culture implicitly, and how can we like make steps, right? So we are, I just launched our racial equity logic model internally, and that will be public, hopefully like in the next month or so, to really create a strategy and a roadmap. So I'll also pinpoint that I've been really proud. I'm newer to the organization. I think 5 months in, but I've been in community for my, as long as I've been in community, 10 years or so. But what I'll have to say is that we've done to advance racial equity outcomes this like last year was when the pandemic hit, we were trying to figure out what to do, right? As many other organizations, especially or funding organizations. And I really am optimistic and hopeful in the way that we've been talking about and using administering organizations to make sure that funds get out directly to artists and arts organizations who are most disproportionately impacted by, the triple pandemic of systemic racism, the actual pandemic, and this recession, right? This economic impact. So I'm really hopeful, and I want to underline that piece as a government agency. Using administering organizations has been a really great tool and interesting conversation for how our funding goes out.
And if I can I riff off
Yes,
that a little
please.
bit? I think I'm ready. I don't want. So one thing that I think that Catherine is bringing to light is that, we're a small agency, but we're still part of a large bureaucracy. Those systems don't go fast. They don't turn on a dime as much as we all want them to, as much as I've tried to press and others have tried to press before me or even with me right now. They don't move very quickly. So the best we can do is realize who we really are and look outside of this structure to find the systems that actually do work. And that was evident in our ability to get the funding out. It wasn't as much as we wanted, but we got a good chunk of money out to the community to support artists that were most disproportionately affected by COVID. So that they were losing money, they were not able to do their art. And so through the relationship that we established with an organization that had a history of being able to produce rapid grants, CCI, that's how we were able to get that work done. In addition, when we received the CARES funding, the COVID money that came through NEA to the California Arts Council, we wanted to make sure that we did it ourselves this time, but we did it with our current artists, our current grantees that had networks to reach artists. But we did put a stipulation on those funds that those had to go to individuals that represented those most disproportionately impacted. And that was quite a learning experience, not only for the California Arts Council, but for the grantees, because they had to then move in circles that they hadn't moved in before. And sometimes maybe just because of the low numbers, didn't pay attention as much. I don't want to mischaracterize any one group, but I know that at the end of the day, we heard from people that thank you for pushing us a little bit to get into these conversations with organizations that we had not had any conversations with in the past. So that's a victory. And so I think that I want to acknowledge the governor. Governor Newsom has supported us changing our language a little bit and being much more focused on race equity and also really calling out BIPOC communities as much as we can within the confines of the Prop 209 law, but really pressing up against that as much as we can to find ways so we know if we're serving up by and for. And I said that before, but I want to reinforce that. We want to make sure that any money that's going to be let out, that we think through a decision support tool, which Catherine is assisting us in making that part of our practice, so that we are always thinking about race equity in pretty much every decision that we make internally. Our council is starting to adopt the tool, has already adopted the tool. So, it's an undercurrent of all the activities that we do. And I think we've also, one other really important aspect of change has been that our panelists who are the community voices. It's an important, like, it's this cornerstone of the work that we do, that our grants are adjudicated by a community panel of arts experts, all different facets of arts, all different disciplines, and all different areas of arts administration or artistic practice. They're part of our panels. Prior to a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, we did not have a compensation of any sort for these individuals. And we started seeing the demographics and the hue of these individuals being much more, much less BIPOC. And so then we focused on changing the law, providing a compensation, and it's not, you know, doesn't pay for the time. We get so much more than they do, but we are offering an honorarium now. And we're starting to see changes in who's actually applying for a panel. So that's a real time, real simple change. You have to pay people for their talent. They give you their talent. You have to honor that. And that's something that we've been working on at this stage.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Shayna, do you want to follow up on this?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk at kind of the small organizational level, the things that Destiny has done. Like I said, I don't think of us as just an arts organization, we're a community organization. So a lot of what we've been doing, especially since the pandemic, is phone calls to families. We have a food pantry. We actually, right before the pandemic hit, had just gotten access to the Alameda County Community Food Bank. And then the pandemic for like our snacks, and then the pandemic happened, and we were like, well, we have this relationship, how can we keep it going? So my program associate goes to the food bank every few weeks. We update like what we have on in stock, and families can access that. We started doing panels similar to this, virtual panels called Creating Connections. Over the summer, we had local and international youth activists talking about their work and what they've been doing. We have wonderful panelists from Brazil, young people doing climate justice work, local young people, including some of our own Destiny young people who have been leading marches here in Berkeley and Oakland. Our next upcoming one, February 17th, we're hoping to talk to businesses and organizations just like this about what actual changes they are making to advance racial equity. But one big thing that happened is we had a young person this summer, an intern, who was looking at Destiny's racial equity policies and what Destiny does. And what they recommended was that Destiny start an anti-racism task force that is comprised of young people to advise the organization on racial equity. And so that is my joy, is youth development. So I have been leading that group through a process. And actually, I won't even say leading, I've been facilitating the process. It's really come from them. We did a lot of reading so that we were all on the same page about what anti-racism is before we even started to like discuss changes. And now we're getting into that phase where they're, coming up with action plans and prioritizing what they want to focus on and all of that. And that has been lovely. And also we are paying them. I made it very clear that if this is something we are committed to, then we are committed to putting money behind it, and we are paying those young people for their time and for their work. We also did that over the summer as well. We were doing some curriculum development, and we had young people look at that and help create that, and we made sure they were paid for that time. They just actually looked at our racial equity statement for the CAC and made recommendations about that as well. So we're just trying to, get them involved in all the different aspects. And it's a combination of young people who have been at Destiny like since they were 8, 9 and are now in their teens. And then some young people who are just completely new to Destiny and care deeply about social justice and want to talk about these issues. And I think that's really important because often organizations get locked into only taking feedback from within. And I think fresh eyes are so important. And some of those young people who have maybe because of this pandemic have never stepped foot in Destiny Building before, but are deeply invested in making sure that social change happens. So.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it, all of you. So Catherine, can you provide an update on what steps arts organizations can take on the local, state, and national level to better address inequities in their communities, and maybe share some methods that have been successful?
Yes, thank you, Shayna. I was just like reveling in what you were just sharing and like feeling, I actually come from youth development as a young person, and then moving into a teaching artist position and arts administrator. So everything you're talking about is like, oh, my heart, I forget. And then you just made me happy, made me really happy. So reveling in that joy, thank you. Yeah, I actually think you hit on the pieces that I was going to share. So my trajectory has been really deeply local. I do consider myself a cultural organizer, which is an interesting background and a very helpful background to being in this work on the statewide level, right, in terms of work. So when I was thinking about this question, I really wanna I feel like you answered it already, Shayna, with like listen and organize, right? So at whatever level of your realm, right, as Ayana said, what is knowing who we are as institutions, knowing what our realm of influence is and what is our role and what has been our role and what is the community wanting our role and inviting us into. So I was just like, oh, Shayna, everything you just said was like what exactly I was going to talk about. So really identifying on whatever scale we're at, who is our community, what role do we distinctly play? Because I love that framing of Destiny isn't just an arts organization, we're a social justice organization, right? And artists are not a distinct solo population that lives in their own little world. We are actually community members. We are in a neighborhood, right? Or maybe multiple neighborhoods. So remembering that we are community members as organizations, as institutions. And really, what is our role? Understanding what our organizational roles are. And then what listening, right? What issues of inequity are community members pushing and advocating for? So I love that you're talking about the connection with the food bank. I've seen so many organizations locally say, we have venues, we have space. What is it that community needs at this moment? And community needs food. We are in a survival mode, right? And maybe it just means focusing on that for now, and then as we're talking about recovery or strategic planning, you know, with this new context, not this new context, but this, I feel like hyper real is the word I want to, like the more real context. What is going to be our role moving forward? Knowing that, you know, our communities are in food deserts, or what is it? Experiencing food apartheid. So really taking the lead from community, whether it's about police accountability, public education, renters' rights, food insecurity, and identifying our power. So whatever level, you know, if you're a neighborhood organization or a regional organization or a statewide or national organization, what is the power and influence that we have and hold that we don't really think about? Or maybe we do think about, but we use for fundraising maybe. And can we use it for a different purpose? Or in addition to fundraising, can we use it for a different purpose? So I'm all about listening and organizing. And I'll just share that one example of that is through art, I'm like ABBA, indie, ABBA, arts.
Arts Education Alliance of the Bay Area, and it's AABA.
No, I'm talking about ABBA.
Oh, no. Oh, you're talking about ABBA. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. The Arts for a Better Bay Area.
Arts for a
Yes.
Better Bay Area.
Okay, sorry.
I just had a big moment.
Obviously, too many vowels happening with all of our organizations.
One, I think, example of this strategy or tactic is ABBA, Arts for a Better Bay Area, that was actually developed in San Francisco by Lex Lifite and Ebony McKinney, may she rest in power. And they organized, they realized what their sphere of influence was, and really organized the arts community and artists and arts organizations around cultural equity, and actually pushed so much around funding focused on cultural equity, and were able to get organized and got more money, like baselined more city funding for specifically cultural equity. So I just want to share that methodology. And then I think Destiny is a beautiful example. And then ABBA, Arts for a Better Bay Area. That's so embarrassing that I forgot that name, is a great example. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Ayana, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, well, while I was listening to Catherine, I failed to mention that one institutional change that I think the California Arts Council is very proud of is after learning what we learned and engaging around GARE, it became very apparent to all state agencies that were involved in the cohort that there needed to be a dedicated person to work this within our organization. It's nothing, you can't just talk this, and everybody can't just break this work up and we all take 10% of our time and we're going to get it done. It's never going to happen that way. So I do believe that we were one of the first agencies in our cohort to establish a position, a race equity focused position, full-time individual. And gratefully we got Catherine to come on board. And that has been everything for our agency, because we're here, there, and everywhere, and we needed somebody that's really focused on it. And I think what Catherine brings to the agency, and it could be a model for other organizations, is a dedication to the work, right, for one, and then sharing a practice around race equity. So I would say to every organization that really wants to do, and we're still learning. I mean, I was kind of kicking myself that I didn't do my land acknowledgement in my introduction. I'm terrified of doing it. I haven't done it a lot, so it's nerve-wracking for me. But Catherine pushes all of us to, step out there and, walk your talk and do the work. And that's something that's very important to our agency, to have a dedicated person that keeps that, vision and pushes everyone. And then I would also say non-traditional partners. As you know, I shared already that I have a background in public health. I'm also a performing artist, in my personal history. My family is families of artists. What I guess I want to share is there are other sectors of individuals that are focused on the same outcome, just coming at it at a different angle. So don't forget your non-traditional partners, looking at, organizations that have funds that they might want to move over into the area that you're working in to support the same outcome, remembering that we're all part of the same community and we want the same things at the end of the day, the same outcomes. So definitely engage in non-traditional partners. That's something that we are working on at the state levels, Department of Public Health. We're working on strategies. There's conversations happening about really looking at some of the public health models to help support artists right now. And so, Department of Education, and I'm thinking at a statewide level, but within an organization at a community level, look at other organizations, nonprofit health organizations, or organizations that are really trying to work on supporting, homeless and insecurely housed individuals with food security, or even gardening. I mean, there's so many ways and so many partners that are sustainable gardening that our organizations can tap into the talent, and together it can be more powerful in pushing the race equity agenda.
Do you mind if I just piggyback off of that?
Yes.
So one of the things that I really loved about the early stage of this whole shelter in place thing was seeing funders have to recalibrate, and seeing them reach out to organizations and have to be like, just how can we help? Like, how can we help? Or like, okay, I know that we gave you this money with the expectation that this show or this community event or this thing that we can no longer do would happen. And we're not going to take that money back from you because it's not the same outcome that we expected. Instead, we're going to let you keep that money and do what you need to do to keep your organization, to keep each artist, to keep your community, you know, connecting, thriving as much as possible in this time. Indy gave me the term trust-based philanthropy. I really appreciated seeing that happen and that shift happen. And I think it needs to continue to happen. How do we institutionalize that? One of the things that has frustrated me working in arts education and with arts organizations is so much of our funding being dependent on projects, having to come up with new ideas every grant cycle that sound fun and cool and you know, like to justify the work we do to develop young people's minds like and their hearts and their engagement. And so I want us to find ways to institutionalize that trust that these organizations have been doing this work. And the thing about art is like a young person could be 8 and participate in an art program, and you might not see the full effects of that work until they're 18 or 28 or 38 or 48 or 58 when they're giving back to those arts organizations. And so how do we institutionalize that? And I do really appreciate the work that the CAC is doing with the equity statements and all that. I just kind of want to address what one of the attendees was asking about. I think we also do have to think about organizations who have already been doing the work, who have had the racial equity statement before it was a thing. Organizations that are led by BIPOC directors, that are founded by, like Destiny was founded by Black and queer people. Like, you know, it's and our staff, our teaching artists have always reflected the communities that they're in. So we also have to think about, like, how do we trust that the organizations who have already been doing it are continuing to do it? And the organizations who have already been pushing are like giving them the room and the resources to fully do what they've already been doing and have been like begging, begging to like, just give me the space to do it. So now we're in this wonderful moment. We talked about not going back to normal, but building back better. So like, how can we truly institutionalize that trust?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's awesome. Indy, do you have anything you want to speak about on this?
I just want to I think specifically for white folks out there, white arts administrators, I am a white person. And so wanting to speak to that, just what you're saying, Shannon, just the idea of how to listen, like Catherine also mentioned, and get out of the way. And I think about this is such a unique opportunity to look at where power resides on a statewide, national, but also get very hyper local. And I think we've seen specific examples of that. And just to say, for white people to really reflect on how power shows up, how whiteness shows up, how things like perfectionism and the idea that something is super urgent right now, it has to be done right now, and we're going to sacrifice relationships to get this thing done. And how even just what Shayna was saying, trust-based philanthropy to me is about the organizational culture that Catherine and Ayana are talking about developing, in that and it's through everything. So how are you as an organization, not listening to the young people or communities of your organization, or not listening to the staff or any white leaders? How are you not listening to BIPOC staff because of these other ideas of what needs to get done? or what you think needs to get done. So I think at the basis, it's about a lot more collaboration. It's about white people talking with other white people to educate themselves and not expect their BIPOC coworkers or community members to educate them. And I know the National Guild for Community Arts Education offers really great resources. And right now they have a series around anti-racism as a compass. They also have root work series, and myself and Jen Tremblay Chambers in Chicago helped to co-launch the White Advocates for Racial Equity group. So these are some really, because I love all the specifics, and so I just wanted to mention for white arts leaders, know that I think there's also a lot of fear around, and just being honest, people are, this has been their whole lives. These are some of their baby organizations they created, and it's really hard to move away from that and move away from that leadership. But I also want to name that there's so much more that can be done if more space is given for more voices and more leadership. And so I just encourage folks to not act from a place of fear, but act from that place of hope and potential connection, and like the awesome work that's going to happen, because this really is where we're moving towards.
Great. Thank you.
I'll just add one little caveat, or one little addition, not a caveat. Thank you so much, Indy, for that statement. I would just make that a universal statement for all administrators, whatever you identify as. Our work really has to be about mentoring. It really has to be about providing opportunities for leadership from people that are within your organization and outside your organization, because eventually we got to go. Like, we have to move on. We have to pave the way for someone else to have the opportunity. And that is not an easy thing for anybody to do. As I start to round the corner towards where I'm going to be making a transition and into something else, I have to think about that. And it's hard to give up that something that you love, but we have to create space, not only for individuals, but also so that we're funding people that haven't been able to be funded before. So in terms of mentoring and in terms of creating spaces and not just funding the same individuals or same organizations over and over again, that's something that at a state level we're grappling with as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question is, what are your outreach strategies to connect with marginalized individuals and communities? Indy, you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, I'd say that, again, the relationship building is so key. And like Ayana spoke to, going outside the usual networks, going outside the comfortable spaces, and going and showing up in other people's spaces, because there's a lot of organizing there's already happening. And if you have some great idea, I'm sure there's already a group out there who's, had years in the making of doing that. So I'd say that it's about connecting and educating yourself and looking around, rather than and assuming people are going to show up to your space, going into or reaching out to other spaces and seeing what is already happening and figuring out those overlaps in ways that you can create win-win situations where everyone's benefiting. And I know we can do that. And it may take a little bit more creativity to get outside of the usual silos that we sort of create for ourselves. But I think there's a lot of potential to kind of leverage and do some creative thinking around that.
Thank you. Shayna, how about you?
I think it's really about partnership. We have been forging both new relationships and deepening relationships with partners that we've worked with. We have a group over at Lion Creek that we've been working with in East Oakland. Maintaining that relationship, that's an area that we know, even in the non-pandemic times, it was hard for us to get over there. Like, it's hard for young people. Our center is in North Oakland. It's hard for young people to get to us. So we've had to make partnerships over there. We're also partnering with some homeless youth places. Just if we can get our teaching artists to the spaces where we are needed, that is really important. And I think it's really like, it's relationships. it's so much of it is about when I create like my call list of families that I'm going to call, I cheat a little. I pick the parents I definitely want to talk to, but that's because I know when I call them, I'm going to ask like, how are you doing? And I miss your kid's face, and like, so making sure that I'm calling, both the people that I really want to have conversations with, but also the people that I'm really concerned about their well-being. So I want to know more. I'm going to ask more questions. So I think it's about knowing where you fit in that, and reaching out to the communities that need you, finding the people who are already in those communities that you can collaborate with, is really, really important. I think I like when I think about like how do we reach out to those communities, using your networks and knowing where the need is highest, looking at that data, knowing where the need is highest, and then figuring out who you can partner with.
Thank you. Ayana, do you want to follow up on this?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the state process, is always looking at data. I mean, that's kind of a standard way that we do our work. Actual data on our applicants who started an application in our grants management system. Right now, we only have accessibility to our grants through an online process. So we're looking at the challenges with that and how that's not completely accessible to others. We're seeing a lack of broadband across the state in some areas. So we know that we need to do a different outreach strategy for those communities, rural communities, indigenous communities. We know that even in our best efforts to bring people that we have never touched before, we're still missing the mark, and we have to do more. So outreach is an area that we have to do more, and we have to invest more into that. Those strategies, bring people in. We need some positions filled to do this work, to really do it thoughtfully. Like you said, Indy, we can't do it in a rush. We have to do it thoughtfully. And it's not just about statistical data, it's anecdotal information. We're bringing those messages into our strategy. So I think that we saw an increase in applicants this year because we did some targeting, or I hate to use that word. We did some focused outreach in certain areas of the state, and we're seeing that there are organizations that have never applied before that have applied. Sometimes it's a love-hate to see those data sets, because it's like, oh, wonderful that you're coming to us for the first time, and we hope we can find you. We hope there's enough money, because there's only so much, right? But I think engaging with communities that we haven't engaged with in the past, and then following up on those relationships and ensuring that they're fortified and that they thrive. We've outreach, and we're doing some work with Native American artists. We need to continue that work, and I think that's one challenge that a state has, is that sometimes an effort happens and then something gets in the way of continuing that, and that definitely diminishes maybe the capacity of that relationship. And so you have to go back after dealing with that crisis and try to re-up on those relationships. And sometimes that is not, it doesn't work out the way you want it to. So those are some of the realities of state work, but that's an area of focus. And our strategic framework for the state is to develop advisory work groups. So we will be looking at establishing more work groups. We're looking at arts funder collaboration, trying to see who's got the money that wants to work with us. Once they put their money out, then we can put a little bit out. It has to go that way, not the other way around. And then looking at state government roundtables, that's part of our strategic framework, to make sure that we are maximizing the other sectors in the state that could help us get our goals achieved. So those are some of the strategies that I know are top of mind.
Thank you. Catherine, how about you?
Yeah, I feel like I want to summarize a little, or like key phrase. Reciprocity is definitely part of our becoming more of a practice for us internally, and specifically paying people and acknowledging the emotional and intellectual labor that we ask of folks to offer to us. And then what is it that we can offer back, right? So we're trying to pay more folks. I think right now A good example of that is our evaluation contract of our portfolios. And we'll have some deep dives into communities to round out some of the data that we're gathering in terms of funding. And part of that is slowing down, like folks are saying, you know, community members are not going to be on our timeline. Even though we're excited, we're like, but don't you see how this moves? It's like, nope, we need to move at the speed of trust. Thank you, Adrienne Marie Brown, and all the geniuses, Indigenous and ancestors who have helped to create that emergent strategy book and thinking. And that it's going to take so much longer than we anticipate, right? We were like, yeah, this will be 2 quarters of the year, and then that project with that community will be done. Nope, it will take probably 5 times longer. And being prepared and realizing that like it's okay to slow down. And I think for us also is really centering and focusing. When you were trying to come up with the word, Diana, I was like, focus. Really focusing our efforts and being clear about who are those communities. Is it at this moment, because we have a racial equity foundation and foundation, we really are with an intersectional practice. It's like, okay, who are the BIPOC community members in this rural community? Who are the BIPOC community members in this urban setting who are also experiencing low income or who are low income? So that's for us really important, I think, and important as a practice to really be focused and identify, whether it's through data or through anecdotal, qualitative or quantitative data, that we're really identifying who is that marginalized community, because you can't just go around and say we're gonna work with, or how, you just can't, that's such a broad term. So like who is the community we're actually focusing on and wanting to see those outcomes change and work with to see those outcomes change.
Thank you. So I think we have time for one more question, which I think, Ayana, this one's gonna be for you. We have a question from Liz Luke. Going back to the lack of BIPOC and females in executive director roles, I'm wondering if the California Arts Council is allowed to share data on what organizations are paying senior level directors with consideration for budget size, location, ethnic backgrounds, gender identities. I feel like this data would empower some when negotiating a sustainable wage. Is the California Arts Council allowed to share such information?
If we could get the information, I'm sure we'd be allowed to share the information. Our challenge, I mean, honestly, the challenge with the state government is that we're very much hindered in asking some of those specific questions that would get that data set that was just asked about because of Prop 209. So we've been super crafty about maintaining the law, staying within the law, but trying to ask other questions around race and gender. But we haven't been successful in getting a whole data set that would answer that question. If we ever get that, though, I think it's our responsibility to share that. I just got some information from some wise person who talked about how we can frame asking some questions when people come in as applicants, but for grant programs, because we've been wanting to answer the question, who are we funding? Who works there? Who's part of the board or the board? And we are struggling with those questions because we do have a responsibility to be adherent to Prop 209. We're pretty hopeful recently when we thought that was going to be overturned, and unfortunately that wasn't. So we're still in that process. We can only ask for volunteer responses, right? So we still can ask the question. We're just only going to have a small N because people don't have to answer the question. The challenge is that when do we ask the question? If it's related to funding, that's the violation. So any questions around demographics, especially racial demographics, and in any way associated with the funding opportunity, that's where we get in trouble. But I think we can probably work through, as Catherine mentioned earlier, utilizing other organizations that aren't bound, other non-government organizations that aren't bound by that law to help us get some of that information. And I think the evaluation outcomes will help kind of maybe start that conversation, and then maybe it would be a springboard to move forward. We're definitely committed to the idea of increasing the pipeline of BIPOC and women, LGBTQ. I mean, we're invested in the idea of that leadership showing up in the community, and we just have to be crafty and think of new and innovative ways to get there. So we're starting, but we don't have the full set yet.
Indy, I think AYABA, maybe in relationship with TAG, we did a survey a few years ago. It was definitely an opt-in, but I don't remember if we asked that question. We were more trying to find out teaching artists' wages and what organizations were paying teaching artists, so that teaching artists would have a little bit more information going into discussing wages and pay. But I think that might be, again, it's going to be opt-in, but that might be something that AYABA can look at.
Yeah, and I think whoever asked the question, I'm sorry, I didn't see it on the chat, but if you want to, I would love to get that question to me as an email, just to keep it in my brain, because maybe there's a way for us to establish a partnership with an outside entity, researcher that could help with that. We have been tapping into some, economic strategists that have been helping us with some of the work that we're doing right now. So I think it's an extremely important question. So please send it to me, and I will.
We'll do that.
So.
Great, thank you. So we're coming up, we're a little past our time, but I do want to thank you all for participating today. This is an amazing conversation, and I hope our attendees got as much out of it as I did. I took a lot of notes. So again, I appreciate you all being here. If you'd like to learn more about our guest speakers, please visit our website at www.artsformc.org, where we will also be posting a recording of this program later today. So again, thank you all and have a great weekend.
Thank you, my fellow panelists. It's so lovely to meet you and talk to you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for the
Take care.
Really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was good to hear from everybody. Thank you all so much.
Take care.
Here.